Welcome to Loud and Clear, a program geared toward the younger generations. You can listen in every Thursday at 7 p.m. or find the plug to our YouTube channel on kgtcradio.com.
Hi, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Carlos.
And welcome to Loud and Clear. This is part 2 to our Confirming the Call. We have Peter Bell here with us. And we're excited to have you again. And so we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to start out. Carlos, you had a question, kind of a highlight, something trending right now we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure we've all seen because it's trending and we're trendy around here.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
This topic, 100 men versus one silverback gorilla.
Silverback gorilla.
Specifically.
Silverback. Okay.
So I'll
So I
let you
think
guys
this is
answer
probably going to
first.
be a little bit, like this is going to date this episode a little bit because it's going to come out way later. So this is kind of old news now, but we're going to revive it.
Yeah, let's dig in a a little bit.
Okay.
I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Peter, what do you think?
I think the men are winning 100%.
You think so?
I really do.
I feel like the thing that I feel like is it's difficult for 100 men to like gather around. Like you're not really having 100 men take on the gorilla at one time, right? Because you can't really get that close and smush in 100 men to attack something at the same time. Are we saying weapons or no weapons?
I think I don't think there's weapons. I think it's like hand to hand.
Okay,
right? Like,
if it's hand to hand, yeah. I think that's what's difficult here is like think about it. Like how many men do you think could surround a gorilla and actually like be in reach to like attack?
but think about it.
Solid
One guy
6 or
jumps on
7.
his back,
Okay, well I get that.
right?
Okay.
Like pokes his eyes so he can't see.
Okay.
So now he's like bamboozled.
Man, just a blind rage though.
Yeah,
still, a
that's true.
silverback
He
gorilla.
is, right? But then you trip him.
Okay.
So then he's like swinging at nothing.
So
then he
guys
falls.
are dying in this
Yo,
situation.
We're losing
Definitely.
we're losing a bunch of guys.
Probably 50 at
Like
least.
going into it, you're gonna tell like 75% of you guys are dead.
Okay. 75%.
But the 25 that make it, we're
Yes.
gonna make it.
Heroes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going
Okay.
out a hero. But I think,
All right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I have too much faith in humanity.
Yeah, I don't know, man. What do you think, Peter?
I think 100. I think you get a solid 6 or 7 people around punching at one time. You know,
Okay.
one gorilla swinging its arms gonna knock down a few, but one swing's not gonna take a person
That's
out
true.
completely.
But
They're
maybe
gonna
though,
get back
because
Do
they
you know how tough though a gorilla's abdomen
I was
is?
just about
I
to
do.
say, like, they do pound on their chest, don't they? They do that?
Yeah,
That could
like,
be damn wrong.
like I think you could punch as hard as you want. I don't think
I
it
don't
matter.
think, no.
It would wear down.
That's
after
what I'm
100
saying. You have to go
punches.
for the weak spots. The eyeballs, the ears.
Yeah, you do. You have to just. I think you just
Maybe
have
even
to
bite a toe or something. I don't know.
Maybe. I think you just have to full on run.
Yeah.
You have to embrace gorilla.
Yeah, you
and You
are,
have to go
yeah.
full of gorilla.
You do.
Yeah,
Like,
I think you
100
do.
gorillas
Yeah,
versus
you do.
one gorilla.
You have to become a gorilla.
yeah.
Ooh.
In order to attack a gorilla.
But I also think it depends on who's fighting, right? Because, like, if you take the average male,
Yeah.
probably not. You take
No.
a couple of prime Mike
We're
Tysons.
talking like 100 John Cena's.
Yeah.
Okay.
John Cena!
John Cena's taking
Just
one out.
imagine the gorilla's like, just looking around, and all of a sudden he's dun, 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 dun.
Because then you're like WWE. You're like you got John Cena flying at your head.
Yeah.
I don't
And
care
he's
if you're
strong.
gorilla or not. He's a big boy.
Yeah,
He's almost gorilla size.
he's pretty big. Or
Well,
like Mark Henry,
They're throwing
WWE.
I have no idea who that
Strongest
is.
man in the
Oh,
world.
strongest man. Okay.
I mean, you get a couple of those guys.
Got a couple.
You don't
Tim
even need
Tebows
100.
in there.
A couple, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Guys
I'm
that
just
are
saying.
twice the size of a gorilla in the first place.
That's,
I'm just saying. I just
Yeah.
think that the men could take it.
Yeah, if you had that. Now, if you had those kind of men, maybe.
Yeah, the average male, absolutely not. Nope.
No,
100
absolutely
men
not.
picked at random.
100 of
a little
me,
bit of everybody.
toast.
Yeah, 100 of me, toast,
Yeah,
gone.
yeah. I
Cooked.
don't think that it's gonna happen. I'd probably like have a heart attack first.
Oh, I'd pee my pants.
I'd probably. That's what probably would happen. Yeah, no, I think we're. My vote though is I think we're losing. Unless it's 100 John Cena's, I think we're losing.
I agree. If it's peak male, I think we win. But it's like if it's an average male, sadly, I don't think we stand a chance.
Well, that's a great spiritual topic.
It really is.
It is.
One that needed to be addressed for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you had like 100 Davids, like with like Goliath, if you had 100 Davids and 100 slings, done.
Done.
It's
Oh,
going
easy.
down.
That's just rocks from all directions.
Yeah.
Little bullets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good. Well, but it only takes one actually.
That's
With God's help, it only takes one.
takes the Juan.
Yeah, it takes one. So, yeah, well, that's a great highlight of the week. That's a great thing. And we're probably at this time, it's just going to revive that topic because that topic's probably been dead for a little bit when this airs. But we're going to talk about the real issue of this week, talk about the real highlight is talking about our calling, talking about what God's called us to do. Talking about what that looks like, and for you teens out there, like what this looks like in high school. The types of calls that you might have, and if you guys want to chime in at all, feel free. But like thinking of like types of callings, I think of like obviously the ones that we always think about is like pastoral or like evangelical, where you're traveling in your ministry, which is all cool stuff, but like, what's some examples that you guys can think of simply fulfilling the call of God?
Well, I think, like God, Jesus, when he went into heaven, like he told us, like, go and make disciples of all nations. And so I think, even if you don't have a so-called pastoral ministry, and even with pastoral ministry, like we are all called to at some point or another go and make disciples of all nations.
Yeah.
And so I think, just like, the call of God for our lives is simply at the root of it is that we would follow in his footsteps.
Yeah.
And so if we're living our everyday lives and we are being loving and we are loving others as we love ourselves, and we are, walking like he walked, and we're being genuine, and we're trying to show Jesus. I think that's the greatest calling of all. So many times we get wrapped up in a title and in this and that, but you can be a pastor all you want, but if you're not making any sort of impact outside of the four walls of the church, then you failed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we get so wrapped up in that, but if you want to follow what God has for your life, simply model what Jesus did, mm-hmm. and walk like he did, and love people, and be genuine, and we're in the world, but we're not of the world. Yeah. And so, we obviously we're here, and so we're called to make an impact. And so, doing what Jesus did is the best thing we can do.
Yeah.
And simply that is the call, is to go and make disciples of all nations. And so spreading the gospel, and that is just as we can do that simply by living like Jesus did.
Yeah, definitely.
I think a great way to be a good example would be just be friendly, be kind.
Yeah.
Share a smile, shake a hand.
Yeah.
And don't take part in poor conversations or poor jokes. That's a great start.
Yeah. And how have you avoided that? Like an example for yourself, like to avoid poor conversations, is there anything that you would recommend?
Straight up saying that you don't like this conversation. It's a tough thing to do, but you can just come out and say it.
Yeah.
Or I just walk away.
Yeah.
Is another thing to do.
Yeah.
Just walking away. It's not a scaredy cat thing to do. It's being the bigger person and not taking part.
Absolutely.
Because it's just going to bring you down and the people around you if all you're doing is talking bad.
Yeah. And how do you like get that like internal confidence too? Because I think we're afraid, like every man deals with the fear of man.
Mm-hmm.
So we deal with the fear of not being liked. And how would you say for you, have you like gathered the confidence or gathered the strength to say, okay, I'm going to walk away from this and not feel like you have to be liked or not feel like that kind of thing?
Little prayers just under my breath or in my head, just little prayers to asking for confidence or asking for help to get past it. Mm-hmm. And, just asking for a spiritual confidence to come over you to just be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because just myself, I don't think I can do everything that I have.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't know, it takes even little prayers. It doesn't have to be anything big or loud. Mm-hmm. Little prayers.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and that kind of that confirms what the Bible says. It talks about praying without ceasing. Mm-hmm. And, some people would think that that's like a audible prayer or it's like super intense prayer. That's not necessarily true. It's kind of just a consistent conversation with the Lord, and because you're continuously seeking what God has for you and the call of God. And you're having this conversation with God, like, man, even if it's like a test, sometimes we think that like a test in school, Like sometimes we think that God doesn't care about the little things, or like there's this stigma with just the world, like God is a side piece to our life, or it's like a side thing to our life, or Jesus is a side thing to our life, when really he's everything. So if he's everything and we're designing relationship with him, we should be in consistent conversation with him. If you're a teenager and you're in a relationship, or you are having a romantic interest in somebody, you are texting them all parts of the day throughout high school. And I remember that, texting in between classes, texting, whenever you can, because you're craving to like see where it's going, and you're craving the relationship, right? So you're consistently talking and communicating. And I think that that's what we do with God, is we need to do with God, is we need to consistently pray without ceasing and have that kind of consistency in our life. And we are talking out of, just so everybody knows that's listening, we are, our last week, we were out of 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 through 4. And it essentially just is talking about the promises of God and knowing him, and that we can be partakers of his nature. And so there's something that he wants us to partake of. Like, he has an amazing life for us. We don't have to be subject to our humanity and our desires and fall like what we've seen other people do. And so we can live an amazing, amazing life in the call of God. And like you were saying, Carlos, is like making disciples. You may not be called to pastoral ministry or be on the worship team or whatever it might be in your church. You might. I'm sure that every church has a place to serve. Every single church.
Yeah. Always needs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always needs. But at the same time, your call when you graduate or whatever that looks like, you might simply just get into a trade and make disciples.
Yeah.
Set the example. Like, you might be in construction, and you might be the only dude that doesn't swear all the time. You might be the only dude that's not talking dirty, but you live a life, you're filled with joy, and you are excited to learn, to grow, and do those things. And if that is the example that you set, man, people are going to flock to you.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to find somebody like that. And it's going to be a model of like, oh, I can work construction and not cuss like a sailor. I can work construction and not talk dirty all the time. I can actually do that. Like, people exist in this field. Yes, they do. Yeah. People that love the Lord and that are seeking God and seeking the call, they're setting an example. So you might simply be called to be in the workforce, and I feel like around this table, there's pastoral call here. But I think that's a huge thing. And if you guys want to speak to that at all, that's...
Well, I would add to, I think it's getting easier and easier for people to notice something different about you, because we live in such a dark time.
Yes, yeah.
And everybody is so bombarded by their emotions and anxiety and unhappiness and discontentment, that when somebody is purely just content with their life and somebody has joy, people notice that.
Yeah.
People see that. And so that gives like such a beautiful opportunity for us as individuals, when they say, hey, how are you happy? How do you have joy? Well, it's Jesus.
Yeah.
Because Jesus is joy. Like, sometimes we think, we think Christianity, like, we got it going on if we're miserable. But we're not called to live in miserable Christianity, like, that's not what God has in store for us. And so just having joy and true joy and being content, and like Peter said, just being nice.
Yeah.
You don't see that anymore. People aren't like that anymore, So to just do those small things, that's going to open the door for us to be able to talk about who God is and why we are the way we are. Maybe you weren't like this before and now you are. And the reason I have joy and the reason I have peace is because Jesus transformed my life, And so I think it's becoming easier and easier to do that, because not everybody has that. There is so much discontentment in our world because nothing but God can give you contentment. There's no true contentment outside of Christ. And so we see a lot of young people and even adults who are struggling with being content because they don't know Jesus. Yeah. And so if you have that, that's attractive. It's appealing to people because they are seeing what they're missing and they crave that. Every human being craves to be content. Yeah. That's why we have this never ending thing inside of us that always wants more. But when you get Jesus, you understand that that's all you need.
Yeah.
He's all you need. And so there's true contentment there. And so it's the little things, we don't want to overcomplicate what it means to go and make disciples. It doesn't mean go and preaching at every corner. It just means being who God called you to be, and walking in what God has already done for you, and walking in peace and in joy and in love and all these things that God has already instilled in us.
Yeah, and that's good. And that kind of leads into kind of a question that I have for you, Peter, is like, as a teenager, did you ever experience kind of the pressure of like, what are you going to do when you get older? Like, are you going to go to college? All these questions of like, almost like people trying to sway your call or trying to fish for what are you going to do with your life kind of thing.
Yeah, I get questions like that all the time. What are you planning to do when you graduate college? Because I'm about to graduate here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. What are you planning to do? Where are you going to go?
Yeah.
I always try to pray about it before I give an answer. And I say I'm going to stay here because really, for a while there was a big question in my spirit if I was going to go to a Bible college or if I was going to stay and try to learn from my own pastors. And ultimately learning from my own pastors was the answer that came out.
Yeah.
And so staying here and actually learning from Carlos and from you is my biggest goals. But when people ask me that, my immediate reaction is just, I don't know, because I don't know my future. I know what I'm going to do eventually, but I don't know my future. I don't know all the steps, like you said in the last week. I don't know all the steps that lead to the next landing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's good. And that's like, it's so hard. Because I'm sure you got that question too, Carlos. Like, and that's, I got that question for a long time actually after I graduated, and it's kind of like people place so much importance on what you're going to do with your life when we're not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's like I'd rather be content and joyful today.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter what you do, like
Absolutely.
in a job sense. Now if God's calling you to do something, and you're not walking in that call or you're scared or whatever, like, seek the Lord and get prayer. And like, that's one thing. I think that's more so what we see when we're walking with God is like, we'll have the urge to like, God will give us a picture of what we're supposed to do. And then it's up to us to obey God and follow that. But rarely is it ever a situation where we need to go try to find what we need to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that usually what leads to negative things in life.
Yeah, I think it's like, in society, it's like big to go find yourself, really go find your purpose, go find, and it's like, no, God already has a purpose for you.
Yeah.
God didn't from the moment that you and I were created, God had a plan for us.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you. God has plans for you. If you are a born-again believer, if you have invited Christ into your heart, God has plans for you. And I don't know what those look like, but I know that they're for your good. I know that they're to prosper you. I know that God wants to use you in whatever that looks like in your life, whether that's in your family. And I'll tell you this, my biggest fear, knowing that I am in the pastoral ministry, is that that God would use me to affect other people, but not my own family. And what I know is this is it's a beautiful thing. I love seeing people that were broken and God restores them, and then their family is next. And I think that's a beautiful thing because that's the will of God for every single one of us. And so God does have plans for you, and whatever that looks like in your life, whatever you feel like God's calling you to do, embrace it and trust God and trust that what God is doing in and through you is a beautiful thing. And I think just with that, I think God, like I said, he has plans for every single one of us, and they look different, and that's okay. It's okay for I said it on Sunday, my fruit is going to look different than your fruit, and that goes with your calling. My calling is different. Even if you can have two pastors but they're different. You
Yeah.
know, it's because we're all called to be different. Yeah, I might do the same thing, but the way that I'm reaching people and the way I preach and the way I teach is different than you, and that's the way that God designed it to be.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just think it's powerful that we're talking about this.
Yeah, no, and I think it's super good too. I'll be the biggest cheerleader for anybody that wants to go to college or do anything. I'm not trying to talk it down, but what I am trying to talk about is just this pressure that all the teens feel to like try to know their call or know what they're supposed to do, when really it's more so like try to know Jesus first, and like and then if God confirms something, oh my gosh, dude, the feeling of being in the will of God. And like knowing like this is what God has for me. He wants me to go to this school. He wants me to do this thing. And having that confirmed and setting and just praying with God, if that is where God's leading you, you are going to have a dynamic and joyful experience. Yeah. You're going to have the time of your life because you're going to be in the will of God. Yeah. And that's going to be an amazing, that is like, I remember like God confirming calls as a young person. I so desperately wanted to go to college. I've applied for college probably 3 times, and the last minute dropped out every single time and didn't follow through because God kept on saying, as much as you want to do this, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not what I have for you.
Yeah, and I think like what you're saying, I think it's powerful. I think this needs to be said that, and I say it all the time, and it's mainly to remind myself that just because something is good does not mean it's God.
Yeah, that's true.
There's nothing wrong with having a job.
Yeah.
You need a job. Everybody has bills. You got to pay bills. There's nothing wrong with you having a job. And there's nothing wrong with you going to college. Those are good things. But if it's not what God has for you, then it is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because the best thing you can do is have nothing but be in the will of God.
Yeah.
As opposed to have everything but be outside of the will of God.
Yeah.
And so I think, just remember, just because it's good does not mean it's God.
Yeah. Abandon what life tries to give. Abandon what the world says you need to have.
Absolutely. And
just pursue God. And even if you have little, like God, I think God wants us to be successful. I think God's going to bless. I think that's just who God is. But at the same time, like God might call you to not have much for a while, but you will have the peace. Exactly. You'll be rich in your spirit. And I'm going to close out with this, but I had an experience where I went to go visit some family on the coast. It was like a work thing. And I stayed with a family, and they're amazing people, but they're very wealthy. And I stayed there, and it was great. I stayed at their house, and beautiful house, like gorgeous. And then I went and I stayed. We usually go over there. We usually stay with another family, and a lot of them stay in the same house, smaller house, older house. Literally one of the first houses built in the town. It's older, and just kind of like not modern, kind of like, but like cozy,
Yeah.
And like they don't, make near like the money that the other people do. Like it's just like they're pastors, they're operate off a limited income, things like that. But it's like, man, the peace in that home.
Yeah.
The joy in that home.
You can't buy that.
I look at the two and I go, I want that. Yeah. I don't want the big house, and all the finances if I'm not going to have this. Mm-hmm. And so, not that there's anything wrong with the other people, but it's just like, man, the peace that was in that. And so it's like, I'm always going to choose what God has and God's joy and God's plan for my life. And hopefully that encourages somebody that's a teenager out there. I mean, whether you're an adult or a teenager, I think that can encourage you. But because I know that you're going to go through it. I mean, freshman year to senior year is really when they start ramping up on, hey, what are you going to do with your life? What college are you going to go to? What are you going to do?
What you going to do, boy?
What you going to do, huh? So, but yeah, so hopefully that's encouraging to you. God has a call and plan for your life, even if it's just the simple call right now of just following him, pursuing him, and letting him use your life to impact other people, and just having peace and contentment in your high school years. Who has that? Like, that's so rare to find somebody who's just peaceful, content, and joyful for the simple things. And God's going to bless you, and it's going to be attractive to other people. They're going to want what's on your life. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's gonna be good. I'm excited for where this goes for future episodes. But if you want to send in a question for us, we didn't get to a question today because I think we just had great conversation. And then before that, we talked about the gorilla thing. So, but If you want to send in a question, email us at vcfrevivalyouth@gmail.com, and you can put in the subject line loud and clear and ask us a question, whether it be serious, whether it be a joke, or something funny. We'll be excited to answer it on the program. So thank you so much for listening. You will hear us next week.